Hello and welcome to Bags of Action. My name's Steve. My co-host is Pete.
Hello.
For the episode, we're going to be talking about The Old Guard, the 2020 film, which is currently on Netflix, starring Charlize Theron. And it's based upon a Image comic written by Greg Rucka. And so they've done a Netflix film. It's just come out the last few days, and we're going to talk about that.
We are. And I think the interesting thing with this, because, Greg Rucka, we both know, I've known for a long time as a writer. He's a novelist as well as a comics writer, and now I guess a screenwriter too. And quite a lot of his work has been adapted. So I remember Whiteout was a brilliant comic, and then the film was okay, but someone else obviously did the adaptation. Stumptown, the TV series, is good. I don't think he was in the writing room for that. But the really interesting thing here, and as a fan of his work, you could really tell, is that he wrote the screenplay himself. So someone else didn't come in and adapt his work for the different medium. He actually got to do that himself, and I think that's and I'm a long time fan of his books, things like Queen and Country and Lazarus in particular, but I hadn't actually read The Old Guard, so it was interesting to come to some of Rucka's work cold,
because I have read it, so it was actually slightly different perspectives. And I was just thinking before we came on air that I'd listened to another podcast with spoilers in where Greg had talked about the film and the process of getting it made. And obviously we should say up front, we're going to have some spoilers in this review. So if you haven't seen the film, go and watch it and then come back. But he was saying that when they started developing the film, he said he would like to write the first version of the screenplay. And obviously, getting the writer on board, that's a bit of a thing. And do you really want the comic book writer doing the screenplay? And and then he said, okay, I'll do the first version. And if they don't like it, they can use it as a base or go somewhere else or do something different. And he wrote it and then had a meeting with the director that had been named, Gina Prince Bywood, and all this kind of stuff. And then they were like, okay, we like it. And we're going to do this, going to do that, could tweak this. But they kept his screenplay. So it does actually say that it's written by him because all of the drafts since then have been his. So they kept his original. And they didn't end up regretting, because they've been burned in the past where a comic book writer or a novelist has said, no, I want to do the screenplay. And they go, oh, okay. And it turns out to be a mess. And
they either, quite often, I think, probably can't change enough or aren't willing to make enough changes to make it work in a different medium. Yeah, it's interesting. So you've read the first trade, is that right?
That's right.
Okay. So should we tell people, I guess, a bit about the premise, I suppose?
Sure.
That would be a good place to start. So, covert team of immortal mercenaries, which straight away is a high concept. Is like, yep, okay, I'm in. Which is why I can't believe that I didn't pick up the book. It just completely passed me by. But so Charlize Theron is Andy. She leads this team of mercenaries who can't be killed, and it's basically how they their identity has kind of been, people have found out about them, and a kind of evil farmer guy is trying to use their DNA to basically try and give this to monetize it basically and to give it to other people. But also you
find out what's causing them to be, because they can die, but they regenerate and come back within a few seconds. So he wants to find out, what's causing it, and then we could, one, cure lots of diseases, and two, help people live longer. Why should it just be them?
Yeah. But also make a lot of money along the way.
That's the other reason.
Yeah. And so I guess, as a high concept, it almost feels like Highlander meets Wolverine to a certain extent, with the kind of, but with a team. What fascinated me as well, because I watched the trailer, and this film I don't think is very much like the trailer at all. I don't know if you thought that, because the trailer came across as this very kind of fast-paced, lots of quick cuts kind of thing, and I thought, this could be okay, but it doesn't feel like a Rucka thing. So I assumed someone else had written it and they'd kind of changed it, but this is actually a lot more thoughtful a movie. And a lot more character-driven than I expected. And it does. For me, it was the first time of any of the adaptations of Rucka's work I felt, and even though I haven't read the comic, I felt the same kind of feelings I get when reading his books.
Yes.
That same kind of, I really care about these people, and they're interesting, they're slightly different, and it's. So I guess your experience, would be completely different, because you've already got you've already seen what these people look like. You've already got the voices in your head of what they're like. So how much does it kind of shift away from what's on the page, or how does it stick? How close does it stick?
Pretty close to what's in the book. So in the comic, you get a lot more flashbacks. So in the film, they have the occasional thing. Like at the start of the film, I think there's almost like a montage of different things and you realise that there's more to Andy than what she's said. And in the comic, it just starts with that straight away. So before, she's in the present, but you get these glimpses of her in other time periods. And now throughout the comic, they can do that. They can have just a page of her talking about other moments from different eras that relate to what's happening in the present. And they can't really do that as easily in the film. You can't just suddenly cut to like 2 minutes of her talking out loud, with a voiceover, and then coming back to the present and carrying on, because that would just completely ruin, the tension or any kind of pace. But in the comic, you can do that, and it doesn't disrupt anything. It just adds weight. So that was, it's some of the things that's another reason they probably don't always get the comic book writer or the author to work on the screenplays, because they don't understand the different mediums. You can't have certain things. They just don't work. But Rucka knows enough that he's just said, yeah, okay, I get it. I can't do this. I can't do that. And, at one point, I think, he'd done a draft of the screenplay, and he sat down with the director, and she said, if we remove this character from the story, it doesn't change anything. And he looked at it, and he's like, oh, God, it's so embarrassing. You're right. So he had to kind of change some of the story, because he thought he'd done certain things. And he's like, no, because I'm relying on stuff that's not there. But that's from the comic, and you might get to set up later. But he's like, this is a film. There is no issue 7, issue 8. It's like you've got to set it all up and execute it in the 2 hours, and that's it. Job done. If you get any more, great, but you may not.
Yeah.
It's long odds.
So is the team the same, and is Niall in it because Niall is the new person that finds out that they're immortal, which is a great kind of point of view character for us, and it also means they can get across these things about what happened in the past by explaining to her. It gives you that great window into the team and their relationships by having a new person come in.
So it's a way of getting exposition and explaining what's going on without just talking to the audience directly. So in the book, it's the same thing, where a soldier is injured to the point of pretty much she should have died while she's out on duty. And they realize she's been, it's happened, and then they have to go and recruit her because she can't say. She was going to be sent home and probably experimented to find out why she's come back, and even her friends are anxious and nervous. It's really awful. It's that really uncomfortable scene where her friend says, hang on, I saw her die. And another friend is like, well, would you rather she was dead? And she's like, no. But equally, they're freaked out because they saw her with her throat cut, and she's coming, and they go, oh, there's no scar. And then she lies and says, oh, it's some special new skin graft thing. Yeah. And it's like she's lying. She's already lying straight away because she can't explain it, but she doesn't want her friends to look at her differently. And of course they're going to, because she's come back from the dead. And that's not normal. It's not natural.
And I thought that was really well done, because it wasn't overplayed, and you didn't get to see too much of her life beforehand, but you just saw enough that there was some real clever shortcuts of okay, these are obviously, they're working together, they're in this, in this platoon or whatever together, they're obviously very close. And then it felt very real what that reaction would be. And that's one of the things I think across the whole film, that yes, this is quite an outlandish premise. This is not a documentary. But
what?
Sorry, Steve. But at the same time, the human relationships, you just totally buy them. And I think one thing I liked about it as well was the casting was not. Charlize Theron, obviously, I know.
Yep.
The guy who played Copley, Chiwetel Ejiofor, who's been in lots of things. I recognised him. I recognised Harry Melling from the Harry Potter movies.
That freaked me out. Yeah. For the first 5 minutes, I was going, why? What? Who is he? And oh my God, he's Dudley Dursley.
Yeah, it's Dudley Dursley. And as annoying in this as he is in that. And I thought, I can't stand this guy. The weak point in the film is this guy. And I thought, no, I hate him. And I'm supposed to hate him. And I can't remember the name of the guy. There is a farmer guy in the States, isn't there, that got into trouble for stuff that he reminds me of him a bit. Skirple. But anyway, it felt very kind of, having a younger villain was quite interesting, actually. But the rest of the cast I hadn't seen. Is it Matthias Schoenaerts, Belgian actor, Dutch actor Marwan Kenzari, Italian actor Luca Marinelli, and and I didn't know KiKi Layne, who plays Niall, either. So it was really refreshing, because yes, Charlize Theron is well-established actress, has done loads of things. But she's in an ensemble team, but you don't really know anything about the actors. So there's no baggage, there's no expectation. None of them are particularly like big, beefy kind of your atypical kind of action stars.
No.
They're just like these people who've learned these skills over thousands of years, and they obviously, and that made it more compelling. I think the fact that it wasn't, your standard Hollywood cast. I think that actually was a real strike. The other thing as well is, and we've talked about this before, like diversity is really important, and this is like a black female director, and the cast is very much like people from various countries and different sexuality and things. But the good thing about it is it's new characters. So rather than trying to be diverse by recasting a character, changing their race, changing their gender, they haven't. And what Greg Rucka has always been very, very, very good at is that. And he's also, pretty much his novels, I think, have got a male lead, but nearly all of his comics have had a female lead.
Yeah.
And in action-orientated stories. And that's what we like in this. It's the two members of the team are female, and there's a whole reason for that, which is ingrained in the story, which is really clever. But even like Niall's old army group are all women, and it's not done. It's a film that's like really diverse, but no one ever talks about it. It's not a thing.
The point of the story.
No, exactly.
It's part of who the people are, but that isn't. They never refer to Niall's race. They never talk about. There's mentions only of two of the characters of Nikki and Joe, because only of where they came from, and therefore they say they were on the opposite sides of the war, but they don't go on to too much detail. If you know, you get it. If you don't, it's a couple of lines and they move on. That's not what the story is about. It's just an aspect of these characters that isn't the story of these characters.
No. And the only time anything's like because Joe and Nikki are a couple in the story, there's a brilliant scene where they're taken in a van, and the only reason they confront their sexuality in the movie is because because of a glib comment that's made by one of the guys. Oh, you two boys, is that your boyfriend or something? And he makes this beautifully poignant speech about how much he loves him, and then kisses him. But that's not what the film is about. There's not, they're not doing press releases saying, "Hey everyone, look what we've done! Isn't it clever?" I did see one article yesterday, which was talking about how Gina Prince Bythewood was the first black female director of a comic book movie. But it's like, but I like the fact that none of those kind of things are being leaned into that heavily. It's just the right people doing the right thing, So it's some people have said that this is a superhero film, and I'm like, it's really not.
No, it really is. There's one power, if you like, that they all share. No one's got code names. No one's got costumes. They don't go and fight another group of people with weird powers and costumes. It's it's action and adventure, but it's espionage.
I think that's laziness of people who go, it's reviewing. It's based on a comic, so therefore it must be superheroes. Or actually, they have got. It's like, no one talks about Highlander as a superhero movie because it isn't one, and it wasn't based on a comic. That is, that is. It's not. It is lazy. I agree with you.
Yeah. But as you're talking about the characters, they're just so good. When the four of them, and then the five of them work together, you can see they know exactly what they're doing. And I've been watching some of the training stuff. So originally, they'd cast a couple of other people, and then Charlize came on, and she was cast as Andy. And it was a bit of a struggle because the character's quite, not bitter, but she's quite fed up, and she's lost faith in humanity. And it makes her quite a prickly character and quite difficult for you to like her. And some actresses didn't want to do the part because they found it uncomfortable playing someone who was very weary with humanity. But she threw herself into it completely, to the point where her production company, which is Denver and Delilah, which is based on the name of her dogs, came on board. So she produced the film. And then I watched some of the behind-the-scenes footage today of her doing the training, and all of the stunt coordinators and everybody said, once she was on board, that was it. They've never seen anybody more committed to throwing herself into the training. And this is the other nice treat, kind of behind-the-scenes thing. All four and all five, including KiKi, was Niall. They trained them in a range of martial arts. So Charlize was trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and then she's trained in a bit of Taekwondo, and then she's trained in something else from Malaysia, and another little bit of here is from America, and a little bit here is from South Africa, and all these little pieces and bits to kind of show the fact that the character has been everywhere, has done everything. It's like a new bit of technology comes out, like a musket. She can spend 10 years working how to use it and become proficient, because why not? And then she's one of the best people with a musket, or, a sword or an axe, and she relies on these things. And it had that almost John Wick feel to it, but they're fighting with blades as well as guns, because they've all done it. Booker's the youngest, but even he was found in the Napoleonic Wars.
Yeah.
And I think we're several hundred years old already.
There is something more. I think you're right. It does have that John Wick kind of fluidity to the fighting, but there's also something a little bit more grounded. It's not a particularly stylized film, considering the premise. It's actually done in quite a. But there's some. I assumed there was lots of Krav Maga stuff, because there's an awful lot of
some of that. Yes,
a lot of getting people to the ground. Which seems to be the modern fighting way in these kind of movies now. Is it's more about disabling people than kind of doing something showy. It's just taking people out as quickly and efficiently as possible, which they do an awful lot to an awful lot of people in this movie.
Yeah. But they mixed so many styles together because Joe and Nikki are from the Crusades. And so Joe, in theory, would be a Muslim, and Nikki was one of the Christian Crusaders. And, that's going back a long time. And what were they trained in? What martial arts were they using, or hand-to-hand combat? And what have they learned from the centuries from then to now? It's one on top of another, So they never made it just one. They mixed and matched different elements to kind of give you an idea that these people have been around for a long time. And they're all masters at what they do, because they've trained longer in these things than the longest masters ever been alive. It's so clever what they've done. I really like the fact that they put the effort in and trained for months.
Because I haven't seen Atomic Blonde. You have, haven't you? Which is another action movie that she's been in.
She produced that one as well for the same reason. She got committed, came on board, and she threw herself into that. And the fight scenes there again in that are brilliant. She absolutely goes for it. And there's a fight scene in a stairwell in Atomic Blonde as the equivalent of the fight scene in the corridor from Daredevil. Wow, it goes on for about 7 or 8 minutes, which doesn't sound like long, but it's that thing where they actually show that they're tired and they have to take a break, and then they carry on, and it rolls. It's like a rolling fight. It's so good. So good. I'm
going to have to watch that one soon as well, especially off the back of this, because I think she's brilliant in this role, because it is that, we've said this before, I guess, when you get really good actors and then get them to learn the physical stuff, it's so much more interesting in a way, because they've got the acting chops, because you do believe that she's lived that long, because, and then when you find out more about her and you find out all the good things that she's done, but she's still wary. And then it's almost, I love the fact that it's kind of like, wow, it's a great thing that a lot of stories do, I guess, but how the new person is the person who teaches her the most, because once she opens her eyes, she kind of reminds her about the good things that she's done.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more depth. And there's a lot more depth to this, I think, than you'd think on the surface. And that's what I liked about it. I think I'd have liked the film that the trailer was suggesting this was, but I think I liked the actual film more, because it just it was a lot more character driven than I was expecting. I thought it was going to be a bit more disposable, a bit more throwaway. But again, I guess I think a lot of that is because it was totally a Greg Rucka project, and that's kind of what he does. He's one of those people, a bit like Brian K. Vaughan, that just kind of is very, very, very strong on character and makes you care about people very quickly, and then does things to them where you sometimes are a little bit conflicted, but you kind of really buy into it. And I think that that's something that happens here quite a lot.
Yeah, and there's that thing where the trailer almost... do you remember a Wolverine film that came out ages ago? And the trailer, or the first, bit over the credits of the start of the film, made you think that it was going to be this awesome film about him living lots of different lives.
Oh, yeah.
And then the film actually started, and it didn't do any of that. That was just the first few minutes in the credits, and then the film carried on, and it was not nearly as interesting as it appeared to be.
Yeah.
That wasn't quite this. I mean, what they did well was they tied bits in. So the bits with Quinn, they tied in, and you got to see her, hundreds of years ago with Quinn, just the two of them. And it was just them for years and years and years. And then a few years later, they meet Lycon, who's the guy that actually dies, who's one of theirs who dies and stays dead. And they're like, well, why? What do you mean? And they don't understand it, and they don't know. And that was another thing that some people struggled with when they were going to make this film.
Really?
Yeah, so one of the people from Sony were originally going to work on the film. One of the producers or one of the execs said, well, we need to know why it happens. And he's like, no, you don't. He said, well, you have to actually tell us in the story. And he's like, no, I don't. That's not what the story's about. And so they didn't do it with Sony. It's not the only reason, obviously, but that was one of the things. It's that's not what the story is.
No, I mean, yes, there's an argument that a writer should always know how to solve the mystery, but not if it is an actual like it's a genetic mystery, that no one has solved. So it kind of, and you have to have that in the story because otherwise, because that was my thing I thought from the trailer, and in a way, the trailer it's very clever. They use bits in the trailer, I think, are pretty much all in the film, but they're actually they come from a completely different angle. The things you're seeing in the trailer are kind of almost the opposite of what they really are. But you had to have something like that because if they can't be killed, the jeopardy is kind of reduced, the threat is reduced, and you care about these people, but you don't want them to be tortured, you don't want them to be spend eternity in a cage, which is why they dread capture. But you needed something to happen. Something had to change and shift. Yeah. And I think they handled that really well because it does suddenly go, actually, yeah, we are immortal, but at any time this could stop. But we don't know why, and we don't know how, and we don't know when. Yeah. And then, again, I'm obviously going to spoil it, but when it does happen to Andy, and then she's trying to hide it, I found that really, because it's kind of what she wants. She kind of wants an end, as you would, I think, if you'd lived thousands of years. Yeah. A bit like the end of the only Highlander film that was ever made. So
one.
Yeah, but there can only be one. Exactly. You should have stuck to that. It just gives her that extra kind of emotional depth, really, that she does want her life to end, but not in this way. She doesn't want the legacy to be ruined, or she doesn't want to. She doesn't want to. That's the whole thing. I never lose a soldier. Her whole thing where she lost a soldier because she feels guilty with the person that ended up at the bottom of the sea.
Quinn. Yeah.
Quinn. Yeah.
I think the thing is that Greg knows the answer to that question, but that isn't what the story is about, and therefore he didn't want to put it in. And the focus is that they appear to be immortal, but they're not. And they say at one point in the film, everything dies, we just get to live a little bit longer. The mystery of when we die, we don't know. And that's one of the first things Niall asks is, well, what causes it? And none of them know. And they all look at Andy because she's the oldest, and even she doesn't know. All she knows is at some point it runs out. Whatever it is, why it happens, even she doesn't know, but they can die. So there's a moment where Nikki gets shot and Joe's kind of stood over him going, come on, because he may not come back. And he's like worried, and he comes back and he's like, oh, okay, huge sigh of relief that he came back, because there's a horrible feeling of, what if that was the last time that he died? And and he's gone, and I'm left here on my own without him. Yeah,
and you approach things in a different way, because if they could die, they'd be fighting, I think, in a very different way. They'd be approaching everything they do differently. But because you can't, but like you say, it's obviously anyone could die at any time. But in a way, it's more poignant than normal death would be in a film like this, because it just means it's much more kind of a chance thing, because because they're not really protecting themselves in the way that you would do if you were mortal. Yeah. And they go into things slightly differently. They take more risks. They know that they can be shot and get back up. But like you say, at any moment that could end. And I love the parallels between kind of Andy and Niall, and I think again we're going to spoil, but like the fact there is seemingly a link between a new person coming along and another person losing it. So maybe the total number maybe is always the same, or it may not be. It's not. Then that's not really explained either. But you get this sense of kind of someone at the start, someone at the end, and that makes their relationship even stronger, I think.
Yeah, and she's having to explain it to her, and at one point she just shoots her, and she's like, "Oh God, you shot me!" And he's like, "Yeah, I had to kind of get the point across and prove that you are immortal." And then there's just that awful moment where she's nearly dry retching and stuff because she's trying to process it. It's like, you can stay here or you can come with me and find out. And she's like, oh, okay. It's like, oh, you haven't got the answers. I said, I've got answers, but you may not like them. That's that thing of, well, why does it happen? We don't know. That's the answer. It's just not one that you can get on board with necessarily. But yeah, there's lots of stuff in there. I also like the fact that they did all of the stuff with Copley, where to begin with, he appears to be a villain because he wants the secret shared. He thinks it's a gift, and he thinks it should be given to other people. The fact that his wife died, and there was a chance that if they had some way to monetize or turn this into a drug, you could save people who are seriously ill, or people could live longer. And, and in the end, he almost becomes like a Bosley figure by the end of the film, which I thought was quite cool.
Yeah, so does that happen in the comic as well? Was he in the comic?
He is, but I don't think to the same degree.
Okay.
Not in the first trade.
Because I like he's got quite a good arc really, where you do assume that he's a full-on villain. Then he starts to query the fact they're doing it for money, and he's more about no, it's not about that. It's about the science, it's about sharing it. And then you kind of watch him slowly start to realize he's on the wrong side, and actually all the research he's been doing, which is fascinating. That was just watching the end credits and just seeing all the rest of the stuff was great. But the fact he's kind of researched and pulled all the pieces together, and I love the way that how they end it, where he's then brought in to basically do that for good rather than, to help them rather than to hinder them and to wipe the tracks behind them.
Yeah, but, she's lost hope. She's kind of said all this time and it's not done any good. We're not helping the world's worse. And then Copley has to turn around and says first to Niall and then later to Andy saying, look, she saved this guy and then 2 generations later he did this and so-and-so saved this. And he says, we constantly reap the benefits of everything that she and all of you have done over the course of many centuries. It's a fact that it doesn't instantly happen, but if you save someone and then that person's grandchild invents the cure for, polio or something, you can't predict it, but these things can happen if that person's still alive. So by helping humanity, she's helping people later further down the line, which helps hundreds of thousands or millions of people. Mm. And it's the fact that they're not curing cancer. She's not helping people in terms of, we stop this war so that more people stay alive. It's like, no, we can go in and do very small jobs because there's only 5 of us. And Niall almost says at one point, she says, what, are we like a boy band or something? Because there's 5 of them, that's it. They're not an army, there's 5 people. They're a squad. You can go in, do small job, get out, and that's it, where other people can't.
Yeah, and it's a bit like the reason I love films like this, I love films where a team is put together for the first time, but I also love films a bit like Predator, where you're seeing people that have known each other for a long time. Now here, they've really known each other for a long time because it's talking thousands of years, but there's that little there's like bits of body language and like shortcuts between them when conversations, but also when they fight, and they kind of know what each other's capable of. And I love that. I love the fact you feel like you're walking into a world that's already very established. Yeah. They've already got their way of doing things. There's already stuff. It doesn't feel like John Wick, where it's going to be simple and then over future films they're going to load it with more and more mythology, because they've already given us enough here to get your hooks in. Yeah. But it's not. Yeah, it just feels much more real, I suppose. But the relationships between the characters, and again, I think that is also helped by casting people that not everybody will know, is you just kind of buy those relationships. And although Charlize Theron is a great actress and is a well-known actress, she hasn't got that kind of starry quality where you feel like she's always the same person. Yeah, she's very much properly in the role. So I think it just, by the end of it, I felt like I really knew all these characters really well. And I think for a modern action movie, that's quite rare, because I think the action has got better and better in recent years in films, but quite often the characterization has become a bit thinner as a result. There's a lot of style over substance going on. But this, for me, was a really three-dimensional story in terms of, creating compelling characters that you empathized with, you understood. And I think, I was really impressed from that perspective.
Yeah, because you're not constantly going, oh, look, that's so-and-so. Oh, that's him from this. Apart from Charlize, I didn't recognize any of the others on the squad. And they have the international flavor between all the different nations, because that's what they're supposed to be. They've come from all over the world. It's not a case of we're casting these people because we want to be shown to having a diverse cast. It's like, hang on, they've come from different parts of the world. That's their history. Booker's come from Napoleonic era. Joe's a Muslim who's come from the Middle East. Nikki, is a knight from the Crusades, came somewhere from Europe. So they're obviously going to be from different places, and it's just casting the right people to fit the roles, not just a bit of column A, a bit of column B to keep people happy.
I think as well, I haven't thought of it until what you just said, but it's, in a way, I guess the underlying theme of the story is that humanity transcends time and place. Yeah. Because they're good people. Doesn't matter what country they're from. Doesn't matter who they are. Doesn't matter even when they were born in this world. It's just about doing the right thing. And that's really powerful, because I think by taking away the kind of international boundaries, and I love the fact they move around. So they go, to France, and but they go into places because they know it's the right place to go, because they know so much and they've been around so long. Yeah. but it's not overplayed. So I used to keep all my stuff here, and this is a great place. I used to come and hide out here and stuff. And I just love those little bits of like, they could go in future films, which it feels like there will be. They could go anywhere, and it's believable because it isn't somebody loading in loads of new mythology. It's actually going, well, these people have been around for thousands of years, and they've got places all around the world that they can go, and they've left things, they've done things. It's like, there's so much scope for where this could go without ever having to kind of set a film in the past, just by carrying on forward with the story. There's so much could be explored, I think, in a really interesting way.
Yeah, and I like, obviously, with the way the film ends suggests that at some point you're going to have more flashbacks to explain what happened. But we had more flashes of Andy than of the others. We didn't see any of the flashbacks for Booker, Joe, or Nikki. No. And I'd almost like to see some of that. I'd like to see Joe and Nikki fighting in the war against each other, killing each other, getting back up, killing each other again. And then just like a year later, they're still killing each other. Like, oh man, come on. Just trying to work out what's going on and gradually realizing that there's something more. And, I'd just like to see bits and pieces. Obviously, Nile is in the present. We know what happened to her, so there's no backstory. Yeah. But for the others, you could have so many fascinating flashbacks to where they came from, moments in time that they saw, parts of history that they were part of or saw.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because I assumed the way it was heading that Andy was going to die at the end of the movie. I just thought that they've taken away her immortality. She's kind of ready. She's kind of already set up the person to take her place. It's like, you'll be the, you always walk into room first. Well, then that'll be you. And it really felt like that. So I was like, oh, actually, she's okay. And then the kind of, I don't know, I was part frustrated the fact it kind of does such a big setting up of another movie, because what I liked about this is it could be a standalone film. It doesn't have that franchise thing. It just felt like a really good story with a beginning, middle, and end. But I would like there to be a sequel. So I was a little bit conflicted. I was like, I would like there to be a sequel, but I don't know if I wanted it to be. It was almost like James Bond will return.
Yeah.
Kind of ending where it kind of went, actually, there's more to this than you thought because there's this. And I liked it, but I was a little bit like, I don't know if I needed that, actually. I don't know. I was a bit.
They could have shown that bit in the first 60 seconds of the new film.
Yeah.
And then as you said, if it was a standalone, that was it. You didn't need those last 30 seconds. You could have just had that somewhere else. Obviously, Booker betrays them, but it's that thing of, well, what they're going to do? Kill him? They can't. So the punishment is quite severe if you think about it. He's the only person. They're the only people that he knows. He doesn't have any other friends because they're all dead. He doesn't have any.
And his children have all died, which is a big part of the reason he became bitter, I think.
Oh, we did see one of Booker's flashbacks.
We did. We saw his son in the hospital.
Yeah. That scene was powerful though, and he's talking saying, first they'll hate you, and then they'll say, well, why don't you share it? And then they'll think you'll be selfish, and it was really good. And then it's that fact of he's on his own completely, and the punishment is a century by himself.
Yeah.
That's brutal. But given what he did, the whole Judas thing, you're like, well, I understand it. But maybe with having somebody new, it'll change the dynamic. He'll get his passion back for a living. Andy has by the end of it, and she's been around thousands of years compared to him.
Or he'll go much further the other way, potentially, depending on why the other person has returned. So, again, spoiler, but there's a lot of questions it leaves me with. But I like that. As long as they, I guess we're in a situation now where, films are taking longer to start back up. But I hope they've done it because they've already made the decision to make another one. I would imagine so, because it's Netflix, they can just get on and do it, I would imagine.
I think they've had the green light yet. I think it's that thing of, we heard, was it less than a month after Extraction came out, they suddenly announced they were doing a second one, remember? We were like, I wonder if, and they announced it. So if it's in the works, it might be behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But I wonder if...
I imagine with both of those, because both films have an ending that sets up another one, in different ways. But I guess the other difference is, like, with the cinema release, you have to wait for it to release in certain countries. You've got to wait for the box office to come in. You've got to look at what you spent on marketing. With this, like, this went straight in at number 1 in the UK. I don't know about other countries on Netflix, because Netflix now has its top 10. Equalizer 2, number 2 this week. So very impressive showing from Action Movie straight away. Yep. But you just think, if you're making an original and it's the most popular piece of content you've got, it'll be interesting to see how long it stays there for. But the word of mouth, I think, from what I've seen, has been pretty good from people who don't know anything about this movie. So I would imagine that they're probably already making plans, but this just might, I guess, could speed things up, I guess.
When they were originally looking at doing this, it was going to be a cinema film, and at some point they spoke to Greg Rucka and said, this is going to be a Netflix film. Do you have a problem with that? And he's like, well, no, because you're going to release it to 120 countries. Yeah. Show me any film that does that goes into the cinema. The day this comes out, it's in 120 countries. There's no other film that does that.
No, it's mad. And I love the cinema experience. I love the big screen.
Yeah.
But having said that, I think about some of my favourite films of all time, and quite a lot of them I saw at home first. Because a lot of it is because I wasn't old enough to see them. But also I lived, right in the sticks, like 15, 20 miles away from a cinema. So it was a big deal to go to the movies. It usually had to be somebody's birthday.
Yeah, a big film. So, why
whereas now I could go 2 or 3 times a week. Yeah.
If you can put this film straight into that many homes straight away, they've all got the translations and the subtitles done, and it comes out, boom, all these people go, right, I love it. Yeah.
And the other thing as well, it works really well with a cast like this for a Netflix film, is that people from each country have got, they've got the Dutch, Belgian, and Italian actors have done some. I think some of them have done. One of them was in Aladdin. I think they've done a bit of Hollywood stuff, but a lot of the stuff's from their own countries. So they'll have their own following. They'll have people that are going, oh, that's the guy from the other. So this feels like a really smart way to go with this kind of movie, is to make it much more international. Use Netflix or Amazon so it's out to people much quicker, and just make it much more than just a typical Hollywood movie. But I think that's the thing with Rucka's always he's never felt like an American writer in a way. Yeah. Because his worldview is very open compared to to a lot of people. It doesn't seem that kind of US centric as quite a lot of things. Well, in fact, we don't set foot in America in this movie.
No, I don't think they do at all. It's all in Europe, UK, France, and I was saying most of it was filmed in the UK or in parts of Europe to double as other parts around the world. So, and
I love that moving around to different places. One of the things I always like about Bond movies is the fact that you just you're bouncing from scene to scene and you're in a different country. You don't need to know how they got there, but you're just in another place, which I liked. And I think you think had this been in the cinema now, it would have been delayed. It might have been a bit like Greyhound, a Tom Hanks movie that they end up selling the rights to Apple Plus just to get it out to people, or it might have been like some of the other movies had like a 6-month wait before they could come out. With
Black Widow's pushed back a year from Marvel.
Yeah, exactly. But this, we're seeing it and we're talking about it, and it's I think that will make a second one probably happen pretty quickly. I think once they can, I would be very surprised if it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think so. So, are we ready to give it some scores?
Yeah, I think so.
Given that I've read the comic, I'll be interesting to hear what you think of it first. So
okay.
You want to go?
Yeah, so I came into this knowing it was a Greg Rucka-based property. I didn't know that he'd wrote it. And I think, I've said it at the start, but it kind of, like 15, 20 minutes in, I was like, oh, this is exactly the same emotion I get when I'm reading Lazarus. And when I read Queen and Country, I'm like, oh, okay. And I was waiting for something to go wrong in a way, almost to like, well, it's very Rucka, but at some point there's going to be some exec has kind of gone, let's do this thing over here, but it didn't. It felt like it kept its thing. It's not stylized like a John Wick or even Extraction to a lesser extent. The fight scenes are really good. The casting, I think, is spot on. The performances are really, really strong. I mean, people say a lot now that, you can only really do compelling characters on TV, but I don't think that's true. And I think this was like a nice reminder that you can do an intelligent genre movie that makes you care about the people. And yeah, I really, really, really like this film. I think it's intelligent, it's got loads of emotion, and the action scenes are really, really strong as well. It's the kind of film I wished I'd written, and I don't get that feeling very often from films these days. So I can't quite give it the full compliment, I don't think, but it's certainly a very, very strong 4 bags of action from that.
Okay. So I knew the big twist in the film because I had read the book. I wondered if they were going to divert from it. Obviously, they didn't. The style of the comic translated well into the film, partly because Greg Rucka wrote it, partly because, as you've said, they had the international flavour of the comic in the film done very well through the cast, through the locations, through the costumes, through the languages. We didn't actually talk about that part of the film they have subtitles, but for a number of different languages. And there's the fact that Andy can speak pretty much any language in the entire world because she's lived for thousands of years. There's nothing that she couldn't speak. And same with the rest of them. They can speak in so many different things. There's nice little moments with her, like with Russian and stuff like that, to do with Nile, and all these clever little touches that they've pulled through from the comic. I loved, the kind of the twist of the film. I like the fact that you bring in someone new and it shows them the ropes. It's a bit of a trope, but it works well, and it's the reason that they keep using it, because it's better than having half an hour of Basil exposition at the start of the film, which makes it a 2.5-hour film, which is what you don't want. It could just completely rob the film of any pace. The characters I related to, I liked them, I cared about them, even when they're a bit prickly and damaged, like Andy. You understand why she's distant from humanity, why she's lost her faith in them. And, Chiwetel is always really good. He gives her a solid round performance. He has a couple of good emotional moments and emotional scenes that make you believe what he's doing and what he's saying. So I really enjoyed it. As you said, the ending, maybe they didn't need the tiny bit at the end, the kind of post-credit bit almost, and they could have done another one, but I guess we'll see. If it's popular enough, I hope they do a second one and they get to explore new areas, because they've now set it up. We don't need to do the origin again. It's all been established. They can then do an exciting new adventure, and off we go. So I'm also going to give it 4 bags out of 5 and say I really enjoyed it. It's definitely worth your time, and I'd take a look.
Nice.
Cool. So this is a kind of bonus extra episode just because we wanted to talk about the Old Guard. You can get in touch with us all usual ways. Have you seen it? If so, let us know. You can email us. You can come onto the Facebook group. Don't forget to leave comments below, like and subscribe to this channel. If you like what we do, you can support us on Ko-fi, and we'll be back very soon with another episode. But in the meantime,
thank you for listening, if indeed you still are.
Good night.
Good night.